Not sure if your business needs an environmental audit? Wondering if you're missing something, but not even sure what questions to ask? If that's you, this is the video you need. We're going to break down everything that you should know about environmental audits. What they are, who does them, what they cost, how long they take, what they usually find, and what happens after. But first, here's the 30-second version on why we're qualified to talk about this. Our team has been doing them since 1992. At this point, we've audited hundreds of sites, maybe thousands, across nearly every industry that you can think of. From heavy manufacturing and industrial plants to small-town auto shops to spotless modern data centers. We've seen it all. This isn't stuff that we got out of a textbook or spun up using AI. Our team is out there every week, walking the sites, reviewing the permits, digging through decades of paperwork, and asking the tough questions that most people miss. If it's gone wrong, we've probably seen it. And if it's been cleaned up, there's a good chance that we had a hand in that too. Bottom line, environmental audits are what we do. Let's talk about what an environmental audit actually is. At the simplest level, it's a structured review of how your business is doing when it comes to environmental compliance. That might mean a focused look at something like your NPDES permit, or it could be a full top-to-bottom review of your entire program. We like to think of it kind of like going to a doctor's visit. You might feel like everything's fine, but until someone checks things out, you don't really know what might be hiding under the surface. An audit helps bring those things into focus before they become expensive, stressful, or public. This isn't about catching you doing something wrong, it's about helping you see the full picture and giving you clear, practical next steps. So you're not stuck guessing if you're missing something important. One of the biggest misconceptions that we run into, maybe the biggest, is around who actually conducts environmental audits. You hear the word audit, and it's easy to go straight to that IRS image of someone in a suit flipping through your paperwork, hunting for mistakes, and handing out fines. And yeah, that kind of audit is really stressful. That is not what we're talking about here. Environmental audits, at least the kind that we do, are totally voluntary. You bring in a consultant because you want to know where you stand. It's about getting answers, not getting in trouble. Here's the reality. These audits are done by environmental professionals like us, not by the EPA, not by the DEP, or any other government agency. You hire us, we work for you. We're not inspectors, we're not regulators, and there's no fine waiting at the end. We come in as a partner to help you get ahead of potential issues, figure out what's missing, and improve your program. Now, it's not to say that inspections don't happen. They do, but a government inspection is a totally different story. They're usually narrow, focused on one area like stormwater or air permits, and they're kind of pass-fail. If you miss something, it can turn into a violation or a fine pretty quickly. And different inspectors look for different things. You might get written up for one issue, and then a month later, a different agency shows up and fines you for something totally unrelated. There's no one connecting all the dots for you. And that's what makes consultant-led audits super, super valuable. We step back and we look at the whole picture, federal, state, local, help you understand how it all fits together. We're not trying to catch you, we're trying to help you feel confident that nothing's slipping through the cracks. If you've been hesitant because audit sounds scary, just know this kind of audit isn't a trap, it's a tool, and done right, it can save you a lot of time, money, and stress down the line. Now, to be fair, not every environmental audit comes from a consultant like us who's on your side. There are a couple of other types that you might run into, and to be honest, they're not always as helpful. In some cases, they can actually create more stress and confusion and risk, so let's walk through the big three. First are internal audits. You might be thinking, we've already got an environmental person, can't they just audit us? And that's a totally fair question. But here's the reality. It's hard to catch problems from inside the system, especially if you're the one who built it. Most internal audits become kind of a box-checking exercise, and even if someone spots an issue, it's really tough to raise a hand and say, hey, we've got a problem that I missed. That's a hard thing for anyone to admit. Next are audits from customers, vendors, or suppliers, and this one's becoming more common. If you work with big companies, think hospitals, government contracts, major manufacturers, they might want to verify that you're doing things right environmentally, and that can mean sending in their own audit team. And these aren't collaborative. They're designed to protect their brand, not help your business improve. And if you fall short, it could cost you the contract or the relationship. And finally, the public. This one surprises people, but today anyone, a neighbor, an activist, someone with a drone, they can look into your environmental program. Your permits are online, your site might show up on an EPA database. People can see if you have a stormwater permit or if your Tier 2 reports are missing. And if something doesn't look right, they can file a complaint. It's not about being paranoid, it's just the reality of living in a really visible world. So yeah, not all audits are created equal. That's why a proactive third-party audit from somebody who actually wants to help is such a powerful tool. It puts you in control instead of leaving you exposed to surprise reviews that could come from anywhere. So let's say you've brought in a consultant to do an environmental audit. What actually happens next? Well, it starts out with us getting to know your business, who you are, what you do, where you operate, and what your biggest concerns are. Regulations vary a lot depending on your industry, your location, and your processes, so getting that context in advance really matters. Then comes our site visit. We'll walk your facility, look at how materials are stored, how equipment is used, where releases might go, what kind of systems you've got in place to manage risk. It's not just a box checking exercise. We're taking a long, hard look at everything you've got and then reflecting it through the lens of actual applicable regulations. It's not theory or guesswork. Next, we review your documentation. That means permits, past inspections, training logs, spill records, reports, whatever you got. And if it exists in a government database, we'll check on that too. EPA, state level sites, your info is often out there already, and we know how and where to look. And this is where the job can get technical. A deep dive audit isn't just a walkthrough, it often means doing real calculations, like checking how much hazardous material you're storing to figure out your generator status under hazardous waste rules, or measuring your secondary containment to make sure that it meets SPCC requirements if you store oil. We might also inventory your materials and then look at what's actually in those materials, like the ingredients that make them up, and then compare each of those against Tier 2 or TRI reporting thresholds. And we're not just checking federal rules, we're cross-referencing state and sometimes even local regulations too. No two sites are the same, and it takes real experience to know what to check, what to ask, and where the gaps usually hide. All right, so how do you actually get the results from your audit? This is where things can feel a little tricky. A lot of people assume that they'll get a big formal report at the end, and sometimes you do, but here's the thing. Once something's in writing, it can start to create problems if it's not handled in the right way. Here's an example. Let's say that we give you a report that points out a few serious issues. You set it aside and life gets busy, and then a year later an inspector shows up and he finds it in your drawer full of environmental stuff. Now it's not that you just didn't know, it's that you did know and you didn't fix it. And that's a much bigger deal. And even beyond that, written reports get passed around, emails get forwarded, folders get shared, copies get made. You just never know where that document might end up or who might see it. That's why a lot of companies prefer something different. Instead of sending over a big written report, we'll often walk you through the findings in a private meeting. We'll talk through what we saw, what it means, what to do next, without creating a paper trail that could accidentally work against you. Some folks even loop in their attorney to receive those findings from us first, and then the attorney relays that information to them directly. And that way, that whole conversation stays protected under attorney-client privilege. Okay, this is one of the most common questions that we get, and honestly, it's a fair one. If you're thinking about bringing in someone to conduct an audit, you might worry, if we're not in compliance, aren't we gonna get in some sort of trouble? Here's the short answer. No, you're not gonna get in trouble for just getting an audit. Not for having something wrong, not for asking for help, not for wanting to know where you stand. We're here to give you clarity so that you can fix what needs attention and move forward with confidence. Now that said, let's talk about the very rare exceptions because they do exist and we want you to be informed. In some very serious situations, like if we found hazardous waste being dumped illegally, we might recommend that you self-report to the appropriate agency. Now, that doesn't mean that we are reporting you, it means that we're recommending you to take the responsible step before someone else finds it. And most of the time, self-reporting actually earns you like cooperation and leniency from the agency in the long run, not punishment. Now, there is also an extremely rare case where a consultant might be legally required to report something, usually only if there's like a genuine active threat to human health or the environment, or maybe if they hold some sort of specific certification that requires it. But for what it's worth, in over 30 years of doing this, we've never had to report a client, and we've seen a lot. So if you're holding off because you're afraid of getting in trouble just for asking for help, you really don't need to be. Our role is to support you, not to expose you. That's how we've always done it, and that's not changing. So how long does an environmental audit actually take? Well, the honest answer is it depends. The timeline usually comes down to two main things: how complex your site is and how fast your consultant can get there and get started. If your site is pretty simple, not much paperwork, no major issues, everyone's available to move quickly, the whole thing might wrap up in just a few days. I mean, that's rare, but it happens. On the flip side, if you've got a big facility, layers of documentation going back decades, and your consultant is juggling travel or busy deadlines, it might take a few months from start to finish. Most of the time though, falls somewhere in the middle. At RMA, we complete the majority of our audits in about a month or less from the first conversation to walking you through the results. Some move faster, some take a little longer, but that's about the average. If you're up against a specific deadline or need a quick turnaround for some reason, just let us know. We'll be honest about what's realistic and do our best to make it happen if we can. All right, so let's talk about cost. Just like the timeline, the cost of an environmental audit really depends on a couple of key things, mostly how complex your site is and how quickly you need those results. If you're running a simpler operation, like a small metal shop with minimal compliance needs, you might be looking at something like $1,000. But if you're managing a large, complex facility, say a chemical plant with lots of moving parts and documents going back decades, that number could be closer to $15,000 or more. Most of the audits that we do at RMA fall somewhere in the middle of that range, usually between $3,000 and $7,500. That's pretty typical for a site with moderate complexity, no urgent deadlines, and a fairly cooperative team on the ground. And just to be clear, we always try to be really upfront about our pricing. If you're wondering what it might cost for your specific situation, just reach out to us. We're happy to talk about it. No pressure, no pitch, just a conversation about what you might expect to spend. So what do environmental audits usually find? That is a charged question, and the short answer, if you can believe it, is it depends. We've seen everything from you're in great shape to you're one inspection away from serious trouble. In most cases, it falls in the middle, and there's at least something that needs attention. Often it's more than one thing. To start, we often find that companies are missing core compliance items altogether. That might mean you simply don't have a required stormwater permit or an air permit, or your reporting requirements like Tier 2 or TRI haven't been identified or completed. We also see a lot of outdated information. A company might be registered as a small quantity hazardous waste generator, but their operations have grown and now they actually qualify as a large quantity generator without realizing it, or their permits haven't been updated in years even though they've changed the way that they operate. Another common issue is missing local or state level compliance things. You might have a federal SPCC plan in place, but you don't realize that your state requires an entirely different, similar version. Training's another big area that gets missed. Even if you understand your compliance obligations, if your employees haven't been properly trained or you haven't documented that training, you're still probably not meeting the requirements. And lastly, documentation tends to be a really big one. Your plan might exist, but it's stuffed in a drawer somewhere or in a filing cabinet, a jumbled mess of papers that no one could really ever find or produce quickly if asked. You might not have training records or inspection records at the ready, and that's a really easy way to get in trouble immediately during an inspection. All right, let's just pause for a second. If you've made it this far and you're starting to feel a little overwhelmed, that is totally normal. Maybe the cost surprised you, maybe the list of possible issues feels longer than you expected. You are definitely not alone. We hear about this all the time. So much so actually that we have a name for this feeling. We have two names actually. We call these feelings sticker shock, which everyone knows, and regulatory whiplash. And it's this moment where this whole environmental compliance thing suddenly feels a lot more complicated, a lot more expensive, and a lot more serious than you thought it was going in. The bottom line is that you are not the first person to feel this way, and you won't be the last. This stuff is confusing, it can be expensive, and yeah, sometimes it makes you want to stick your head in sand and hope it goes away. So is an environmental audit actually worth it? Let's talk about that. Well, at the risk of sounding extremely biased, yeah, we think it's worth it. But it's not just because we get paid to do this for a living, it's because we've seen what happens when companies don't do it. And honestly, that is where the real cost shows up. Environmental fines can be huge. We're talking over $100,000 per violation per day. If a regulator wanted to throw the book at you, it doesn't take long before those numbers start stacking up into 7 figures or more. And that's just the fines. There's also legal fees, business disruption, bad press, lost contracts, or customers who decide that you're too risky to work with. We've seen companies go through all of that, and we've also seen how differently it could have played out had they just taken a proactive step a few months earlier. That's really what an audit is. It's not about nitpicking, it's about getting ahead of problems before they turn into expensive public ones. So yeah, bias acknowledged, but if avoiding fines, stress, and being ready for surprise inspections matters to you, then yes, an audit is absolutely worth it. So what actually happens after an audit? Well, if your consultant finds nothing, great, you're good to go, business as usual. Of course, most audits don't end that way. There's usually something that needs some attention, so the important part is what comes next. A good consultant won't just drop a report on your desk and walk away. They'll help you understand what it all means, what needs to be done now, what can wait, what your actual priorities should be. And if that to-do list feels overwhelming, or you just don't want to take it on alone, a solid consultant should be able to do the heavy lifting. At RMA, that's exactly how we work. We're not here to pressure you into anything, but if you wanted help beyond that audit, we are more than ready. If you need that SPCC plan written or the stormwater permit application prepared and filed, we can handle that. Maybe you want a second set of eyes on your Tier 2 reports before you hit submit, or maybe you realize it's time to really step back, look at the big picture, and rebuild your entire compliance program from the ground up. We've helped companies do all of that and more. Whether it's a small fix or a full-on turnaround, we're here to make it manageable. At the end of the day, the audit is just the starting point. What matters is having the right support to actually take action. And we're always ready to roll up our sleeves when you are. Hey, if you made it this far, first off, thank you. We know that environmental audits aren't exactly light reading or casual video watching, so if you're still with us, it means that you care about getting this right. And that already puts you ahead of most. And it means that you're the type of business that we would really like to work with. So if you're sitting there thinking, all right, maybe we do need an environmental audit, we would love to talk. We've been doing these since 1992. We've worked with just about every type of business out there, manufacturers, warehouses, auto shops, schools, data centers, you name it. We've seen it all, the clean, the confusing, the completely overlooked. And we've helped get a lot of these companies back on track. So our approach is simple. We try to make everything as easy and straightforward as possible. We do not talk down to you. We won't make you feel bad. We won't confuse you, and we will never leave you with a list of problems and no plan to move forward. Whether you're ready to schedule something now, or you just want a rough quote, maybe you just want to talk through your situation for a few minutes, please reach out. No pressure, no pitch, just honest answers from people who do this every day.